Now, kidnapping for ransom and extortion is a rising global threat that affects individuals, families and businesses. The latest figures from the police and the Institute for Security Studies shows a dramatic rise over the past decade. According to the Institute for Security Studies, recent police statistics reveal close to 270% increase in reported kidnappings over the last 10 years. In the most recent reporting period, from April 2023 to March of 2024, more than 17,000 kidnapping cases were documented, translating to around 50 incidents each day on average. To help us understand the depth of the scourge, we are joined by three panel members, with the national spokeswoman for the South African Police Service, Brigadier Athlenda Mate, Nomatlubi Kwinana, a commissioner of the South African Human Rights Commission, and policing expert Eldred de Klerk, who's also a senior associate of the African Centre for Security and Intelligence Praxis. A very good evening to all three of you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show to really address some of the solutions, perhaps, and some clarity on this latest scourge. Perhaps, Mr. de Klerk, let's start with you. You've tracked policing and intelligence trends for decades on end. We know that kidnapping is a horrifying ordeal. How best should one understand what it actually entails?
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers, and good evening to my fellow panelists. The question is a relatively complex yet easy one, because kidnap is defined when anybody takes a person and holds them against their will. It is essentially, that essentially is kidnapping. However, there's a bit more nuance to that, because part of that statistics would be things like I hijack your car, I take you with your car, and I hold you for a period of time. We also have the disappearance of children. So we have extortion. There's a lot of things that goes into a sort of broader definition of kidnapping. It goes even further now because we have ransomware. So if somebody holds your information hostage in the digital world, that's a form of kidnapping, essentially. So essentially, we have to say it can happen to me. It doesn't happen to a particular demographic of people, because the rationale for kidnapping can also differ. It's not, most of the time, it's for ransom, but it could be for all kinds of reasons. It could be family squabbles. There could be rivalry between groups and individuals. There could be political or religious or other motives for the crime of kidnapping. And essentially, our intelligence and policing agencies, together with sister departments, are getting a lot more effective in understanding the phenomena and responding to it.
Yeah, perhaps let's bring in Brigadier Mate. The numbers are staggering, a 270% increase in kidnappings over the past decade. I mean, that alone is frightening. What is the understanding on some of the contributing factors to this sharp rise?
Well, a very good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. The rise in kidnappings that you see, it's when kidnappings are linked to other crimes, and kidnapping per se is not the motive. So the motive can be hijacking, the motive can be robbery, and so on. So that is where we see a spike. And as rightly indicated by Mr. de Klerk, we are seeing a rise in the express kidnappings, where the kidnappers kidnap a person for a short period of time, and the motive really there is to take their bank cards and to clean them out, to withdraw large sums of money for a short period of time, and then they release their victims and so on. So we have seen a sharp rise in that. But in terms of kidnappings for ransom, we did see as early as 2018 a trend where we could see a rise in those particular kidnappings. But I think from our side, we then established the anti-kidnapping task team that was able to at least push back to prevent some of the kidnappings, or even if they do happen, we've been able to rescue a lot of victims, prevent families from paying large sums of money, and so on. So we do have dedicated teams that are working tirelessly to dislodge and dismantle these syndicates that are really moving away from the dangerous type of crimes like your CIT, your ATM bombings, and they are looking now at the kidnapping for ransom as a quick cash scheme.
Very concerning indeed. Commissioner Gunana, kidnapping for ransom is not only a crime, but a very deep violation of human rights. How is the Commission addressing this issue from a rights-based perspective?
Good evening, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Thank you so much for that question. As it has been rightly pointed out, indeed it is a violation of the human rights, to be kidnapped, and of course, just noting that obviously certain other offenses are intended with regard to same. Now, the Constitution is very clear with regard to freedom of, of being abused in any way. In particular, there in Section 12, freedom of movement and security that should be secured. But as a Human Rights Commission, what we then do is, if those type of cases do come before us, which they are highly not likely to come to us, these are cases that would definitely be reported to the police. And of course, if there are challenges, this is when we get involved to say to the police, please look into these matters and ensure that they're given the best attention that they deserve. What we have seen is that the police have been doing their part in that regard, and especially when one looks at our laws, which are effective and which can be applied. But then the lacunas that we are really seeing is that the implementation might be problematic insofar as, just making sure that indeed they're being used optimally by our very own, law enforcement officers. But our laws are really there and they're effective, and if only they can be used properly, we can be able to fight the scourge of these offenses.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps, Mr. de Klerk, let's take this to you. I mean, we heard Brigadier Mate talking about the rise in express kidnappings. What has changed in the last decade to make kidnapping for ransom such a profitable crime?
Essentially, it's a copycat crime. You see it happen elsewhere. You see somebody gets away with it, and you are part of an organized syndicate or even a group of people who act with common intent, who decides that cash in transit, fighting with another gang, all these things, the price of continuing that practice it's a lot more costly. So kidnapping of somebody, even for a short period of time, whether you think you may get the express ransom that you're asking for, or as Brigadier Marty's already said, to simply deprive them of their freedom for a short period of time while you basically rob them of other assets, this becomes a lot more lucrative. And you learn from people elsewhere, and you've learned that it happens in neighboring countries. And I'm not going to blame foreigner influence, because criminals learn from all kinds of avenues. You see it happening in Nigeria, in Chile, in Chad, in the US and the UK, because the other thing about kidnapping, it's a global phenomenon. So nobody's going to come here and say, oh, we learned it from our African brothers and sisters. No, actually, it's a global phenomenon, and it happens everywhere. Yet, how it's done, the tricks of the trade can be learned person to person, or essentially with a little bit of research. And then, so the world is a lot more mobile. We're a lot more mobile. Our middle class have grown. Our material assets have grown, as South Africa has actually become a little bit more settled. And folks are essentially deciding that the targeting people for ransom or for their financial assets, it's supposedly a lot easier. Everybody then had to play catch up.
Yeah.
As Brigadier Marty has said, you learn, you respond, you put specialist people in place with special knowledges and resources and the capability, and they then learn how to respond. They build networks, and in that networks, working with both communities and other agencies, they've been able to have a lot more success, and those successes will increase as we, through programs like this, make it aware to our fellow citizens that kidnapping is real, it has many faces, and it requires all of us in common effort to actually share the information that we have about what we see, and we can do that anonymously.
Yeah, absolutely. Kidnapping is indeed real.